Welcome everyone to Human Structure and Function 1. Today we will start by introducing some general concepts of anatomy. As you will see, at the beginning of every lecture you will have a slide presenting the objectives you are supposed to reach. Have in mind that in online teaching every lecture is broken down in several short videos, so they are easy to follow. First, we need to define anatomy. Anatomy is the study of the body structures and how they relate to each other. These structures are 3D, so to help you get a 3D visual of structures, we will also have 4 dissection sessions where you will have the opportunity to see and touch real human specimens and get a solid knowledge of all those structures. In the second semester, Enric Ruiz will teach you physiology, which is how the different organs work. That module is also at a foundational level and is called Human Structure and Function 2. As you will understand, the structures and function of the human body are essential knowledge for any health professional. These 2 modules are quite dense, however, we will cover just a part of that knowledge, and it is your responsibility to become lifelong learners and become masters in anatomy and physiology as an essential step to be safe, efficient and professional chiropractors. This is a sentence from the Nobel Prize Francis Crick, who discovered the structure of DNA and RNA, the genetic molecules that contain the information of any form of life. One of your tasks will be to become familiar with the special language that professionals use. Without this new language, used in all the modules of the program of studies, you won't be able to communicate with other professionals, and of course you won't be able to understand the questions in an exam. So make an effort from the beginning to know them well. Let's start with the anatomic position. As you see, this man is standing straight, facing the examiner, looking forward with flat feet and the upper limbs at the body sides with the palms looking forward. This is the reference standard position to look at any body, but any patient, but also to correctly interpret medical images like X-rays or CT scans. The 2 other positions you need to know is when you have a patient lying down. If the patient is lying face up, we said he is in a supine position. If he's lying face down, we say he is in a prone position. Other references in anatomy related to specific regions are also important to know. In this image, for instance, you see that for the head we use cephalic or cranial in reference to the skull. Not only anatomic terms use that reference. For instance, in pathology, otitis means inflammation of the mid-ear, which is in the otic region. Become familiar with all these terms shown here. We also have directional terms to locate parts of the body with accuracy and avoid long explanations among professionals. Alright, so the first one, superior or cranial, which are synonyms, mean near the top. So we can say that the nose is located superior to the mouth. In the opposite, inferior or caudal means below or far from the head. So we can say that the stomach is inferior to the diaphragm. Ventral or anterior means at the front, while dorsal or posterior means at the back. So the spine is posterior to the heart. Medial means close to the midline of the body, and lateral means far from that midline. Then we have proximal, meaning close to the limb attachment to the trunk, and the opposite, which is distal, far from the attachment. Okay, so besides those main terms, we have others that you can check in this table with examples for each one. Once again, get familiar with all these as soon as possible. We also use planes in health sciences, especially in medicine, chiropractic, and physiotherapy. These are important to read X-rays and any other kind of medical images that you will use in a daily basis during your professional life. A sagittal plane is like cutting the body into two sides, right and left. Here is represented by the blue plane. If the cut is exactly through the midline of the body, we say is a mid-sagittal plane. When the cut is displaced more to one side or the other, we call it parasagittal plane. Frontal and coronal are synonyms, and such a plane cuts the body in an anterior and posterior portions. Here is represented by the green plane. Axial, transverse, and horizontal are also synonyms and cut the body into upper and lower portions. Here is represented by the red plane. It's not very easy to see, okay, but it's in the middle of the body. You can cut a full body or a part of the body or an organ. For example, here you have a brain. What type of cut is the first image? You have the three options there. What about the second image? And the third? Okay, you think about it. Here you have a real foot that is cut after two different planes. How are those planes called? Okay, let's move now to the body cavities, which are spaces inside the body that contain and protect the internal organs like the brain or the intestines or the stomach. The dorsal cavity includes the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. The cranial cavity is formed by the bony skull and contains the brain, while the vertebral canal is formed by the different vertebra and contain the spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord are part of the central nervous system, so they need a very good protection. You will see that cavities are lined by membranes. The central nervous system is protected by three membranes known as meninges that we will review in the head lecture, and you will see them again in neuroanatomy in the second semester. The ventral cavity includes the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. These cavities are separated by the diaphragm, which is the main respiratory muscle, and they contain organs that are known as a group as viscera. The thoracic cavity is divided by membranes into two pleural cavities containing a lung each. Between the pleural cavities, we have the mediastinum, where the pericardial cavity containing the heart is located. You can see it here in the image. The mediastinum is a space separating the lungs that contains the heart and the great vessels like the vena cava or the aorta. But it is also used by some structures like the esophagus to reach the stomach or the trachea to reach the lungs. So it's a passage zone. The abdominopelvic cavity consists of the abdominal cavity that contains the stomach, the intestines, the pancreas, the liver, the spleen, and the gallbladder, and the pelvic cavity that contains the urinary bladder and other viscera. And here you have a table as a recap of what we just mentioned. Remember, you have the slides in the VLE as well as these the link to this video. As mentioned before, the inner wall of the thoracic and abdominal cavities, as well as the viscera they contain, are lined by what we call serous membranes. The parietal layer lines the walls, and the visceral layer is stick to the viscera so they can move freely. Those membranes produce a serous liquid that reduces friction during movement. Okay, so don't get confused. We have a parietal layer lining the walls of the cavity, a visceral layer that lines the viscera, and these produce a liquid that stays between them to permit movements. Serous membranes have specific names, so we have a visceral pleura lining the lungs and a parietal pleura lining the inner thoracic wall. Between the two lungs we have the pericardium that contains the heart, and here we have a visceral pericardium sticked to the heart and a parietal pericardium. In a similar way, in the abdominal cavity we have a visceral peritoneum in this case and a parietal peritoneum. For a better communication among professionals, the abdominopelvic region can be divided using two references. The one in the right, as you see, divides the area in single quadrants. But for a more accurate location, there is a system of 9 regions where the central one is the umbilical region, with the epigastric region above it and the hypogastric region below it. Then we have 3 regions at each side that are called, from top to bottom, hypochondriac region, lumbar region, and iliac region. And this is all about general anatomy concepts. See you in the next video where we review general concepts of joints.